Welcome everybody to the latest Street Badass live stream. We have a very exciting live stream this evening. We have special guest Josh Ethan Johnson from Wrong Side of the Lens. So looking forward to speaking to Josh. Josh is currently in Amsterdam, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get Gwen on here. One moment, Gwen, we'll get you in here. So looking forward to speaking to the guy who shot some of these photos right here. Here comes Gwen. That photo in particular, that photo's nuts. How's it going, Gwen?
Good. How about you? Thanks for doing this on this Sunday evening and Sunday afternoon here in the U.S.
Yeah, so it's the afternoon for you, but it's the evening here for us over in Europe. So we're putting in the hard hours over here.
But well, that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Working hard.
Hey, so I'm pretty excited about talking to Josh.
It's going to be amazing.
Absolutely.
I loved this series. This series was incredible.
Love the series. Also, I really enjoyed going through his work. And so I think it'd be interesting to ask about the work and how that affected his decision for doing the project and everything like that. But let's go ahead and see if we can get Josh in here real quick. One moment.
Great.
Okay, Josh, you've been invited.
Oh, you don't want to see that view. Hold on, how do I turn this around?
But now we know where you are.
We track you down and find you.
The secret's out.
Hey, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Thanks for doing this
Thanks for
in the
having
middle
me.
of such an exciting time for you.
Yeah, today was the first premiere in Amsterdam of my 4-city European tour. And then at the end of this month, after the European tour, I end it in LA at a premiere out there at a theater that I'm really excited about.
And so
congratulations.
Hey, how did the premiere go in Amsterdam?
It was great. It was great. A friend of mine out here, a new friend of mine, initially reached out. I mean, how this whole European tour actually came to be is really exciting to me because, I launched Wrong Side of the Lens about a month and a half ago, and instantly people started writing to me and said, hey, you should come out to X, Y, or Z city all over the world and have a premiere or an event out there. And Wesley Verhoeven, I think you say his last name, he's a Amsterdam Dutch guy who spent 20 years in New York as well. He reached out and said, hey, can I set up this event out here where we'll do like a 2 or 3 hour photo walk with the community out here and then end at this really cool theater. And he got a sponsor from this photo tech company called Glass to rent the theater on our behalf. And I was just going to zoom in and kind of do one of these like we're doing now. But then other people in other cities started reaching out with similar ideas and proposals. And I said, man, I should just make a little tour of this through Europe. So now I'm doing Amsterdam, which was the first one was tonight, went amazing. Tomorrow I'm going to London and doing one over there in a couple days, and then Paris and Berlin.
Fabulous. That is so fabulous. How did you, what's your story? Start at the beginning. Did you study photography in school? Where did it all take off for you?
You're really going to have to put me on the psychologist couch for this one. What's my relationship with my mother? Let's start at the beginning, really go way back. I did go to college for arts. I went to a MCAD, which is a Minneapolis College of Art and Design. And but I was an art kid like all my life. I was half into the arts and half into athletics, and art just kind of kept winning the battle. I was in a band in high school. I always drew. I always painted. I always loved photography without even like kind of knowing it cognitively. And then in school, in college, I was studying all of those things. I was studying film, photography, video, editing, painting, figure drawing, and I was like, I loved all of it. And then at my school, I think after 2 years, you had to pick one major, and I was paying, all of this like expensive private school with like fictitious loans at this point. And I realized, oh wait, if I do another 2 years of this school in kind of this without a really good direction, it's going to be really expensive, and I'm going to have to work some crappy job to pay off my loans for the rest of my life. So I dropped out of school. And because I'm a hyper-motivated person, it didn't stop me from getting into creative projects. And I joined a band for 15 years. We did well. And in the band, I was doing our photography, I was doing our graphic design, I was doing a lot of the video editing and all that kind of stuff. So I was refining all of those skills at that same time. So by the time I moved out to New York about 12 years ago, I didn't really know what I was going to do in New York, but I didn't even realize I had all these skill sets kind of in my back pocket. So that's what I've been doing in New York. I kind of pivoted away from music a little bit and been focusing more on the photography and the video editing or video production that I've been doing for like 20 years without even really knowing it.
And just for everybody who's watching, you can find the band on Spotify. I did check it out a little bit earlier, and I put that in the back of one of the stories. So it's the Estate or Estate, is that what it was?
Estate, which is problematic because there's like a heavy metal band in Mexico with the same name, and then there's all of the real estate houses in the world that dominate the SEO. So we basically picked the worst name possible. But
what was your instrument?
But we're proud of our band. So there's a project on YouTube that I like sending people to because it's a collaboration that's easy to find. It's Estate and Liquid Pegasus. And if you type those things in, we're easier to find because of that clarification.
But I like that tune a lot, but we won't dwell on that too much. Hey, so I did a little bit of research on you, and I found it interesting. You described one of your first projects that you did with photography, and that was riding the bus in Minneapolis.
Where did you hear that story?
I can't remember where I read it, but I think it was an interview that I found online somewhere. And it was interesting to hear about your experience because you did a lot of portraits, up close portraits, things like that in black and white back then. And I was wondering, is there anything that you did on that first project that you did that you still use today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so what happened is I was in like a black and white 101 photography and art school. I was, I guess, 18 or 19 years old. And our teacher project at the end of the semester was, hey, you got to start thinking of like what kind of show you want to put together, really start thinking of like a collection of photos. And I'd lived in Milwaukee, so I was a little like accustomed to the city, but city life was still a little intimidating to me. And so I like challenged myself with this project where I was going to just ride the city buses at night. I mean, in Minneapolis in the wintertime, nighttime starts at about 4 o'clock. So it was whenever it was dark, I was out on the buses riding around, and I would approach people, but I'd also try to take candid photos and kind of do a combination of that, which, I mean, even today, a million years later, I'm kind of impressed with myself using that tool as a way to like get out of my shell and get out of like that kind of xenophobia that I had. I mean, I didn't have a severe case of it, but a certain level of it. And I definitely use those ideas today to like a way to feel comfortable is just like go approach people and realize that most people are approachable and most people are willing to participate and talk to you and have their photo taken. It just depends on how you go about approaching them. And I imagine at the time I was a pretty timid kid doing that, but they probably saw I was a timid kid and I was not a threat or anything like that. But I was honest with them. I told them I was in art school, and so I've been doing that for 20 years because I'm a very curious person. I like to talk to people, and I like to observe them objectively from afar sometimes, and sometimes I like to engage with them. So like a project like that is basically what I've been doing for 25 years.
And did you, how did you segue from doing candid portraits to more of your street stuff?
I kind of look at those myself. I mean, feel free to challenge me on this, but I look at them as the same thing to me. It's like, I don't really always get into these hyper classifications of things. I know it can help describe things and have a productive conversation, but when I'm out there doing it, I'm not dogmatic about it. I'm not saying I can't do that and I can do this. I'm throwing the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, and maybe in the curation phase of things, I start to think a little bit more cerebrally about how I want to like project that story or that project. but I try not to think too much about a lot of things, at least when I'm making the work. I try to get into, like, I'm very interested in, like, what my subconscious tries to tell me, or trying to get in those transcendental states of mind with music or video editing. I mean, all the pursuits I've ever done, I basically realized that I'm trying to get into my subconscious and let that speak versus me and my right side of the brain, or whatever side of the brain does all of the cerebral academic stuff. You know, I try to only employ that later on after I've made the work. And that's really the only way I'm interested in, like, engaging in the projects that I do. I've never been someone who can, like, write a script and then film the script and then believe in it all. And, you know, it all has to be super spontaneous for me. Otherwise, I'll just lose kind of like that fire and that interest, that motivation to just keep those projects going.
And so when did you first start thinking about doing this project? Because I know it was a while back.
For Wrong Side of the Lens?
Yes, sir.
So it kind of came really naturally and organically, which again is like how I really like to work. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I don't know what triggered this, but I just realized that even though I've been doing candid public street photography for a long time, I didn't really know why I was doing it, and I couldn't have told you why. And I started getting this idea of, like, what happens if I turn a video camera onto a candid street photographer? And I was starting really simple. I said, take a photo or take a small group of photos, a small project, and get these people to, like, give the context to this art form that really relies on not giving context. And I thought it was kind of going to be this interesting experiment to see, one, if they would do it, and two, what would happen when they actually kind of reveal the possible objective truth behind that image, which, by the way, they don't actually have the objective truth. A lot of times we're still, even as a photographer, the observer of these scenes. We don't know the answer to what's happening in the photos we're taking. We might have a little bit more context than just the viewer, but that's part of the fun of, like, getting people to give any sort of context to these images or small groups of photos. And so what I realized really quickly when I started doing that with 3 or 4 or 5 of my friends in the New York community is that this is really interesting. Like, they're having fun doing it. I'm learning a lot about the power of context and the power of storytelling and the power of street photography as a medium and why it engages people. It just started making me think so much about so much that I started doing more people, and they started getting longer form. People had more things to say, and pretty soon the 5-minute kind of parameters turned into 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and up to 30 minutes episodes, because there was 30 minutes of interesting stuff there to actually, like, keep in the edit. And so it just grew organically, and as it grew, I started reaching out to people outside of my community or asking for recommendations from people. Like, I said, hey, I'm going out to LA, and a bunch of my New York people said, hey, call these 4 or 5 people and see if they'll do it. And they did it without me even vetting them, or really, besides me knowing that I like their work. I mean, that's the first criteria. They have to be hardworking individuals, they have to make good work, and they have to not have an ego and be decent to hang out with for a couple hours.
I need to know all about Jill Freedman. How did you approach her? How did that interview go? That was among my favorite of all of your episodes.
Thank you. That's one that, so in the European tour that I'm on, I'm showing I think a 35 or 40 minute compilation of everybody's episode, and then I'm showing Jill Freedman's full episode because I think it's just such a special episode. She's such a personification of the conversation that I want to get going around this topic. She kind of touches on a little of everything, I think. And of course, she has just an amazing body of work, and she's passed away, so it's kind of just special for a lot of reasons. But I got in contact with her when I was already underway with this project a little bit. I'd already made some episodes, and I don't remember how the initial introduction came. Somebody heard about the project, and they put me in contact with a few people that in the photography world that were in contact with her, and then those people really started facilitating kind of a relationship with her for me, because they I think knew that her time was limited, because she had terminal cancer, which I knew she was ill, but I didn't know she was terminal when I interviewed her. And she was, I mean, if you see the episode, she's sharp as a tack mentally, but physically she was having more problems than I even knew at the time. And I think she passed away maybe like 5 months after the interview. And so it was her family and her photo friends all have for a long time have come together and been helping her a lot, because this was her second bout with cancer that she beat the first one. And so after she passed away, those same people were like facilitating our relationship, and they ran the estate. And for the New York premiere, a couple of her cousins, the ones that run this, they got on stage along with my friend Cameron, who's a young photographer who helped facilitate this too. And to get their perspective on the episode and on Jill was like invaluable to me, because it was really different than my experience hanging out with her. They had a whole different relationship with her than I did. That's all part of the fun, is like getting these outside perspectives.
What would you say the main difference was from your interactions with her compared to the comments that you received from them?
Yeah, and it ties into the premiere tonight, because maybe it's the Dutch people here. Some of them actually saw a lot of the things that her family members were seeing out of Jill that a lot of the American audience, including myself, didn't really pick up on. In the episode, you know, she talks about how she didn't have any kids and she was never married, and it's this like vulnerable moment that she shares with me. But to me, being there and to me watching the footage 5 million times, it was my opinion that it seemed like she really owned that, and it just didn't happen, and it wasn't this kind of sad moment in her life. But to her family members, stuff like that was this tragic thing that I don't know if it's them projecting that, or if they had more context from Jill's relationship around those topics like that. But I had a lot of people in the New York audience come to me afterwards and say, I was really shocked that their family members had that perspective, because I felt like Jill was this empowering spitfire who had sex whenever she wanted to and did, you know, just like grab the world by the throat. And that was my impression with her. But I only really knew her for about 3 days, you know, altogether. I mean, 3 active days. That was stretched out over a long period of time, but those were incredibly intense and meaningful days for me. And, you know, when she likes you, you're in her clique and you're good, you know. And if you're not, I think you're just out. So I think she saw that I was like a dedicated photographer and a genuinely curious person, so I was in.
Did you do? Were you able to see her do any live shooting? Did she take her camera with you at all, or no?
She took her camera out. There's a scene where she's out like on a park bench just across from her street in Harlem. There's the Morningside Park, I think it's called. It's a beautiful park, and we just walked across the street, and she had her camera in there, and I think she like brought it up to her eye once, but she wasn't actively like shooting. Her health was really way more poor than I even knew at the time. She got very tired very easy, and so I didn't get to see her actively work.
And did Jill Freedman at the end get to see your the final episode?
No, she didn't. No.
Okay.
No. So I was editing it when she passed away.
Well, it was a brilliant episode.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's a nice testament to her work, because I think it really shows what she was up to and her brilliance, because she was a brilliant photographer.
Yeah, I'm getting so much feedback from people that are in love with her now because of the episode that had no idea she existed before. So that's like, of course, super exciting for me.
One comment she made in the episode, and Todd, I don't know if you caught it, but she said using flash is like an assault on the subject. And I do use flash now and then, and I try to be respectful, but I wonder if I had told her that, or if she saw me, if she would have said, Gwen, stop. Todd,
interesting, because I use a lot of flash too, and she definitely vetted me by looking at my photography. I remember showing her just a couple images. It was like a trial. I felt like I was, you know, going to get banished from the King's Court if I showed her a bad image. And she grabbed my phone and she's like, oh, this one's nice and this one's nice. And they were pretty flash heavy. I mean, I don't think it would have fooled her that I was pretty, I wouldn't say as aggressive as like a Bruce Gilden, but sometimes I do that kind of thing. It just depends on what kind of image how bad I want the photo in any given second. So I don't know. I think she says a lot of, she takes a strong opinion on a lot of things, and then she sometimes like quietly contradicts herself because I think part of her like witticisms, I mean, she's like Mark Twain. I mean, she's like the funniest person I ever, I think, met in person. She had just a million funny things to say, these hot takes and one-liners that, like, Benny Goodman, is that Benny Goodman? Is he the comedian, or is he a clarinet player? I'm getting confused.
He's the clarinet player, yeah.
I'm sorry, forget it. I forget who I'm trying to say. The guy that was in Goodfellas. She had all these one-liners, so I think part of her kind of like charm was a bit of like taking a hard stance on something and sticking to it to make a kind of a point. But I think she was a little more flexible in real life.
Hey, so I was going to ask you, Josh, when you were making the series, how important was it, do you think, to the other photographers that you were a photographer yourself and that they could look at your work like Jill did? Do you think that got you past the finish line with a lot of these guys to do the thing?
I think so. I'm sure it did. I can't speak for them, but like the shorthand that we had, you know, like one thing you don't really get to see in the films is like my rambling that I do ad nauseum in between. I don't ask these concerted questions like you guys. You guys are professionals. I'm not a professional. My approach to interview is just to overshare and just vomit words, and hopefully the other people just make some sense of it. And so I can't stand hearing my questions or my line of questioning, but I have a good, I think, framework of a question, but it's not concerted. And so I think though that like the general like curiosity and the questions that I'm bringing are very nuanced to this kind of world that maybe a non-street photographer or a non-photographer, I'll say, might not have that kind of like shorthand with. Mm-hmm. But I can't speak for everybody. You know, I can't. And maybe some. You know, it's kind of a question of like, I don't know. I'm going off on tangents. You guys, it's your job to keep me on track. But
let me ask you this. Let's say like somebody who had just done like research on street photography. I just don't know if they would have the same kind of idea as to what it is as mm-hmm. somebody who's shooting it. I think that was what I was kind of getting at. And I don't know how much research you can do without actually going out and taking a camera in the street and getting someone's photo.
Yeah. I think that could make an interesting conversation too. It's kind of the one topic that I'm very interested in discussing is the idea of like insider art versus outsider art. I think street photography is kind of outsider art, at least initially, until you figure out a way quickly to get into that community or that person's, you know, acceptance, personal space, whatever that might be. That's part of the challenge of street photography. Ironically, this project was mostly insider art because I was already part of this community. And so it was easy to do for me because I had a lot of questions for people because, again, I didn't know how to speak to this. I didn't have, in a way, like the same, all these people kind of like challenged me or validated different thoughts and ideas I had, which is really why I did it initially. That was my motivation, is just for selfish reasons. I had all these questions and curiosity for how to help me figure out why I behave the way I behave, aka do candid public photography. Why am I drawn to this? And so even though I was around a million people that did the same thing, it wasn't until I could like put a video camera on them, take the footage home, study it for 5 years to finally start to understand like what those things are. And that all those things that gave me food for thought are literally things I've edited into this project. I mean, that's what I'm trying to capture.
Did the people who the other episodes, have they given you feedback? Did they have any sort of final edit rights? Did you let them see it and change things, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And because I shoot so spontaneously, I don't have like pre-interviews with these people, even if I know them or don't know them. I'm not interested in asking them the same question 20 times. I literally only ask them the question once, and that answer is the only one I'm interested in. And because I'm a good editor, I work as a commercial editor much of the time, I know that I can make something authentic out of very little content. But I don't want 20 days of footage to have to try to retell the story. I really only want to receive a small amount to tell that authentic story. So that being said, to try to answer your question, some of the feedback that I got was people were very trusting for the most part. People, let me sit with this for 5 years. They gave me all their photos and they helped me. They were so generous with their time and their effort to try to put this thing together. And, this is 18 people that I'm like trying to coordinate. And sometimes to try to coordinate photographers, I don't know if you've ever tried that, is like wrangling cats. It's very difficult to do. But people finally came together and I got the things I needed and things I can only edit when I have the photos, so like there's things I need to even start the process. And the tricky part was for some people that I released this project 5 years after it was shot. So some of them had really changed as a person, changed their style of photography, changed their, COVID happened, all this stuff happened. They, broke up with their girlfriends, got new girlfriends, boyfriends, like just so much. And so now that this is going to be like out, some of them were a little concerned that it was going to like represent who they are now versus who they were then. And that's a valid concern. It's interesting to me because like the things that they're saying are so like rich with content and things to think about that it didn't really occur to me, and that's a kind of a blind side that I had on that. But we worked a little bit on finessing some of the things in there, very, very little, which I again appreciate the trust that these photographers had. But mostly I didn't run into people asking for edit notes.
So after the 5 years of doing this project, do you feel that that's changed you as a photographer? Are there some truths now that you know that you didn't know before?
Yeah. I mean, 100% yes. It's hard to quantify what that is for me because I learned like 6 million things from, canvassing through all of this footage for 5 years that it's really hard for me to kind of quantify and put that into words. But I guess some of the things the bigger takeaways that I got from doing this project, which I probably can't help but reflecting in my photography, is just seeing like the similarities in personality types that all of these people that I kind of like put in one project, they all are curious people that use photography to better themselves, and if that inspires other people, great. But they're doing this like ritualistic thing that is a lot of times for personal reasons, not these grandiose altruistic reasons, but they start by keeping their own side of the street clean, and then if it has bigger implications, then they're completely happy about that, but none of them are expecting to make money from this or notoriety, and that's one of the baseline criteria for who I'm even going to consider putting into these sort of projects. Is you have to be just a hardworking altruistic artist to kind of prove that not everyone out there is in this capitalist world just stepping on their grandma's throat for $1. There are people out there that are not expecting fame and fortune from this. But that being said, the irony is that those people, when they work hard enough, are actually given some of those rewards for all the right reasons.
A funny story, you'll like this, Josh. I was in New York, and I had seen Matt Weber's work before, but I hadn't seen him personally.
Yeah.
And I'm walking down the street, and one of the women I was with said, "That's Matt Weber." And I made a beeline. I went over, I introduced myself, and I said, "It's because of your work that I recognized him." And he was very kind. And I think he's exactly the kind of altruistic photographer you were speaking of. He was really, really gracious, and his work is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that like some people are getting a little more interest, like his Instagram numbers have like doubled, which, you know, I say that not as like this ego thing about social media numbers, but I have definitely seen how the people in the photo community, when they have a bigger audience in social media, they're definitely getting some of the rewarded with some of the platforms they deserve to get into. So I hope he, you know, can get what he deserves, which is like more sales on his classic photos and his current photos. I mean, he's been a hardworking person for a long time. So he and everybody else are, I think, those representations of that sort of altruistic person.
Agreed.
So we have a lot of people that watch this show that are just starting out in street photography. Yeah. If you were to give advice to somebody just starting out, what would that be?
Just hit the 10,000 hour mark as quickly as possible. Don't worry about anything. Don't overthink it. Just trust your gut. Find what people, things, places, whatever you're attracted to. Point your camera at it and think about it later. Don't be precious with gear, or don't be precious with what you take or don't take photos of. Try to find a community of people you trust. Don't overthink it. Just don't overthink it. Don't, nothing to it but to do it. It's like the barrier of entry on this is rather low. You can take it with your amazing iPhone that takes 1,000 times better photos than when I started out in digital photography, or even not film photography, because that still takes great photos. But just do it. Just do it, and don't, if you have any interest in it. I mean, the thing for me is like, if you're right for it, you're going to do it. If you're not right for it, you're not going to do it.
I think that's great advice. What was your, for the people who are interested in gear, who are listening, what's your gear of choice?
Anything I have in my pocket that can articulate a blurry image is fine. Like, it doesn't matter to me at all. I'm the least gearhead.
And what, but in all seriousness, what did you use to shoot the documentary?
So so there is a right tool for the right job, and I haven't found this like silver bullet of a camera that does everything that I like to do. Like, the only camera that I bring out with me now is one that fits in my pocket, and I don't have to wear around my neck. That's just annoying to me. But for when I'm going out to do like concerted projects, like videoing somebody or taking like professional, you know, photos, I have different cameras for the job. But for the video camera, I use the Panasonic GH5, which is like, you know, a micro four thirds prosumer. I basically look like a tourist dad walking around with a fanny pack and like earbuds to run sound myself. I'm very unsuspecting, which is kind of my superpower, is just to try to be unsuspecting. And so even though, you know, if I had this like giant camera with prime lenses and all this crap, one, I couldn't manage it myself, but two, it would probably freak even the photographers out. It would probably change the dynamic of our interaction. So it's kind of this low-key tool that puts people at ease, but secretly I'm recording them in ultra high 10-bit HD, but don't tell them.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
So I think this is your quote. I think that you were talking about your video camera. The only tools you need are a camcorder and a smile. So a smile might be part of your
yeah, and I think I'm referring to that is, I don't remember saying that, but I do believe I did say that. That sounds like something I would say. It's just like, just be curious. Just like, you know, shut up and listen to people talking. People are so willing to participate if you approach them the right way and your intentions are good and you're a curious person. All you need, it maybe goes back to the advice I would give to people that are starting out, is just be curious, find a way to look at the world with a fresh set of eyes every single day, even if you're in your house that you see every day, if you're in your same neighborhood, if you can figure out, and Dan Arnold did a great job speaking to this at the second New York premiere, is like, I think we were talking to him about like, how does he still shoot New York? Like I'm a little burnt out on New York street photography myself because I lived there 12 years. I've taken a lot of those images. I'm sure there's a million more I could take, but how do I keep that fresh set of eyes? And he just tries to hit the reset button every day. That he sees everything like this new thing, and I think that's something that you can teach yourself how to do. That's part of this exercise and ritual of like appreciating the insanity and newness of everything around us instead of treating it, you know, day to day as this like monotonous grind. I think that's the real challenge that street photographers kind of figure out a way to exercise.
Do you see more episodes in your future? Will there be more of these?
Yeah, so I'm calling the batch that I have, I'm calling that season 1 in hopes that there's a season 2. And so I'm coming up with kind of a dream team list of photographers I would love to get. And I'm trying to figure out how to fund the project, because the first season, you know, all that's been released, it was self-funded by myself. And that's part of the reason why it took 5 years to basically make, is because I had to kind of put it together on my downtime. And now I want to get proper funding and staff up and have an amazing team of photo producers that can organize and get people that are doing really, really interesting projects all over the world. I have huge visions of grandeur for season 2 that would be, I'm very, very proud of season 1, but I can see how I can improve on this for season 2.
And do you think the time between the beginning and end of season 2 will be 5 years, or do you envision it
not
to
if
be
I get
tighter?
a proper budget. I will staff up and I will be able to do this, you know, really quickly. And I guess the question would be, do I wait again until all of the episodes are done before I release, or do I just kind of release them as I finish them? I would be potentially open to doing that too, because that would kind of just be a fun, different approach to it than I did. I was kind of precious with every time I shot somebody new, I was like, ooh, I got to include that in the other batch, so it goes out with a bang. But that's what helped it take 5 years to come out. It might be fun to just release them as I finish them.
One of the questions, there were 2 questions that popped up. How many episodes total were there in season 1? And do you see the potential for a streaming service picking season 1 up?
I would love that. I don't have any leads on that right now, but if anyone listening, if their uncle is Jeff Bezos, please write him right now and put this in front of him, because I would love that. And all the artists in it would love that too, because I would love to cut everyone a huge paycheck. That the musicians are my friends that did tons of music for it. There's, in a sense, I did a lot of it by myself alone in my bedroom, but in another sense, like all of the artists involved, all the photographers were part of it, and all the musicians. It took a village to make this come out. And there was 19 episodes and 18 artists involved in season 1. But some of those early episodes are like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and they just kept on, like I said before, growing bigger and bigger in concept. So now there's, I think, 5 or 5.5 hours of content for season 1.
You know what I think would be interesting if you actually had it turned around and somehow you were able to do an episode on yourself.
Well, if you go way back into the bonus episodes of season 1, there's a short one I did on myself, which was the first day that I went out with my friend Mark, and it was really a trial to see if this is going to work whatsoever. And I pointed the camera at him, and he told this amazing story about an interaction he had with somebody that he took photos of. And then they turned the camera on me at a different location, and I told the story about taking photos of this guy in Coney Island. And so I've already beat you to that. You can already watch an episode on it.
Yeah, but I'm looking for a 30-minute one.
Okay, well, okay. I'll let you direct that one.
I don't know if we're going to get anywhere with that.
We're doing it right now. This is
you
the
go.
episode.
This is the episode right here. Hey, by the way, Josh, I wanted to thank you because nobody's ever called me a professional before. So you did that a little bit earlier. Thank you very kindly.
Well, you sent me those 3 Bitcoins earlier to do that, so I really appreciate that.
That's great. I really did like that. That was the story of the gentleman named David who was at Coney Island and the pigeons and his feeding them. Is that what
Thanks,
we're talking?
Gwen. You watched my episode. Todd did not. Thank you.
I really liked that one because I went to Coney Island for the first time this summer. I had never been. And I thought to myself, I wonder what it's like during the winter when there's not a lot going on. And that episode showed me that even if there's not a lot going on, you can kind of find something to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, that was really fun because I was about to give up. I think I was walking back to the train at that point, giving up. and then
It's always
I found, and the fun part of that for me was the episode was about this guy who was feeding these pigeons in the middle of nowhere in Coney Island, and he had bags of leftover bread that he had gotten free from the grocery store because they were throwing it out. He's feeding hundreds of thousands of, not pigeons, I'm sorry, seagulls. And so on that, I had the GH4 before that, which is half photo and half video capabilities. It's a kind of a good camera that does both really well. And so I was switching between like slow motion because I got really obsessed with slow motion when I got my hands on like a good camera for the first time. I wanted to shoot the whole world in slow motion because to me, slow motion was and is this like middle ground between like a still image and reality or real time, whatever that is. It was this weird, hyper surreal middle ground. So I was shooting this guy, I was shooting photos of him, but I was also shooting a ton of slow motion. And I took it home and I didn't have any audio equipment with me at the time. And so I didn't have him talking at all, but I just put this footage of him, the slow motion footage. I made a minute-long video of him because I was experimenting with this concept, which I think is really interesting. I'm still interested in it, that how can we make video more like the philosophical approach to photography? Like if a photo is a still image without virtually any context, how can we treat video in a similar kind of engaging sort of way where you're intentionally withholding context? It's much harder to do when you're shooting 24 frames a second or 920 frames a second, as I've been doing with slow motion, you know. And so I just put this, there was just sounds of the ocean and seagulls and then footage of him. And to me, it was just a photo in motion. And it started this whole kind of like experiment that I started doing that I called the Faces Project, which are these spontaneous interviews with people. Basically, you know, when I'm meeting people spontaneously, there's a lot of context withheld to me as the interviewer because I'm just met them at the market, running around New York or whatever it is. I don't know anything about them, so I make the viewer suffer through that as well because I don't know anything, so they're not allowed to know anything about them until the context trickles in throughout the video, hopefully. And sometimes there's not a bow at the end of it or full context given because I never got it as the person. So it's really a fun project for me that I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And it all started with that guy, with that one guy in Coney Island. I think I have 25 episodes of Faces as well that are different lengths and different sizes, all experiments playing with those kind of ideas, which is all my work is just little experiments. That's why I'm interested in it because there's no answer to it. They're just experiments.
Is that one of the reasons why you did I think it was like a 3D photography where was that kind of related to the slow motion where you were kind of
totally. It's just like it's to me it's all about like I think a lot about like perspective, you know, like a good conversation can give you perspective. A dose of psilocybin can give you a ton of perspective. A therapist, exercise, meditation, photography, all kinds of different things can, and perspective is like the only way that I know how to like learn things. And so I think I don't know if I speak for all photographers, but I think a lot of the times the interest in taking the photo is so we can like capture a moment, take it home, and kind of study it and get perspective on it from, 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away above the earth, looking down at it. And I just think that's very productive to do. The more perspective we can get on each other or on ourselves, the better. That's me on my soapbox, at least.
Absolutely. Hey, let's take a look at a couple of pictures here, Josh. Now, this is the one that I led with your feature today. I thought this picture was just nuts. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with this shot?
So now I'm in a position that, like, I love this photos taken out of context. If you go on my website, there's a ton more context that you can see. But it's fun to like think about like how I'm now. This is so hypocritical of me. I don't want to give context to this, but the whole thing, the whole wrong side of the lens is all about like people exposing the context and the story behind it. So I will do it in good faith. But the story is, a friend of mine, Adam, and I went to the New Jersey Edison Convention Center, I think it might be called, the biggest convention center in New Jersey, and there was a pornography convention there. And there was just a mob of people, and it was just this zoo of energy and chaos and fun and just insanity, and it was just a mind-melting experience that, again, the photos and the video that I took there were the only way to like reconcile later on like what my experience there was. And so this is just, I don't even know. Again, I'm the photographer here, and I don't actually know what their relationship was, what was happening. I literally don't know. It just was happening.
That picture's crazy, man. I saw that picture and I'm like, that picture's going on. Because like that angle is nuts.
Yeah.
It's like when you see that picture, you're like, what the hell is going on here? So I love that.
I think the Rorschach test should be what you think is going on here, not what I know is going on here. And again, I don't know what's going on there. I'd like to hear your theories before I give any context.
You snuck up behind them, you had a flash, and then you got down and you got that shot. And that's a ballsy shot, I gotta say. Because I don't think this was one that you were like, hey, listen, can I just get up behind you? Like while you're looking at this lady dance and take your picture, you just went and took it. And I had a lot of respect for that right there. The angle, it's unique. I've not seen that many shots like this. So this shot to me personally works for a lot of different reasons, because there are lots of great shots out there, but this one works because I think the angle, you can tell that it wasn't something that you asked for. And of course it's flash, which gives us a lot of energy, in my opinion. And the colors are great. Anything with red in it, I'm going to pick almost. So I don't know if that's answering your questions.
I think it does. I mean, that was similar to the experience I had. I'll say that.
All right, one other one here, real quick. That's fantastic portrait, really. My friend.
Thank you. Yeah, this one was meaningful to me early on because I'd never had like a digital camera that was like took hyper detail before, and so early on in my time in New York, I got that photo, and his face just has so much going on to me, so much, life has been lived, and it's just the face that's telling that story. And so I just, when I got to see that on the computer screen and all that detail, it just like really excited me. It still is one of my favorite photos.
It's really great.
And I ran into him a couple times on the street randomly, and he let me take my photo again. I'm not sure if he'll remember me. He spoke virtually no English. He was an African guy.
Yeah, really well done.
Great shot, and flash too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's get another one up here, Josh.
So this is an episode, one of the episodes of the, I think, 25 or 30 Faces episodes that I have, and for Faces, a lot of times there's like a photo project around the video project too. And so this was a really, really interesting project for me to do because I was in LA and I was hanging out with some people, and these guys, I was in like South LA. It wasn't actually Los Angeles. It was in like near the water down there by the docks. And I was riding around in lowriders doing this other project, and these guys said, "Hey, tomorrow do you want to go skin diving, not snorkeling, but spearfishing with me, and then we'll show you our gun collection, and you can take a video of photos of it." And I said, "That sounds like an amazing day." And so the water conditions were too rocky, so we didn't go spearfishing because I'm a big fisherman myself. But we drove around, and they showed me like South LA area, and then we pulled up to like their restaurant that they own, and they put on the mask and they showed me their gun collection. And they were very forthcoming about the gang that they were in, the multi-generational structure of the gang that they were in. And it's just one of those things where like I can't help but having expectations and stereotypes from all of the culture surrounding me through music and TV shows. These guys subverted all those expectations. They were the nicest guys, college educated, hyper generous. They would help you move your couch into your house while you're moving. Like just the stand-up guys in person that I felt so comfortable around. They were just great people on a personal level, but they lived a completely different lifestyle to me because they were born into a family that had organized crime. And so when I made the video, which I don't know what it is, maybe a 7, 8, 10-minute video with them talking about the structure of their gang, and it's one of my favorite episodes of Faces. I had to send it to them, and I sent it to the guy on the right there in the window, and he said, "Oh, I have to send this up to my elders to get approval." And you're talking about like edit notes and the worry of getting edit notes from like an organized crime family. I was nervous, and I was definitely thinking they were not going to approve this. But they asked me to take out one detail, one moment of the things when they were listing off their different organized crime pursuits, I guess you'd say. They asked me to take out one of like 7 of them in the edit, and that was the only edit note that they had.
Wow. I have to ask, and I know it's not exactly related to the picture, but sort of in terms of emotion and how it might make me feel. What have you ever had anybody? Have you had any run-ins where people have been angry with you as a result of your photography?
Yeah, I've run into that a fair amount. It's a spectrum. It's I've done candid street photography in New York where people run up and get in my face, and then they pull out their phone and get back at me by videotaping me, which I love to be videotaped. I mean, I'm a ham for the camera. It's not a way to get back at me, to do that. I just want to warn everybody. That's just flattering for me to get videotaped. You guys are flattering me right now by having me on this interview. And you're so professional. Did I mention that?
That Bitcoin part was, yeah, you did.
Yeah, well, I'm expecting to say more Bitcoin. But yeah, people have gotten angry with me, but like, I think that's part of the conversation that a lot of street photographers, get asked that question quite often. And what I think we learn early on is that if you're somebody that really needs to get the photo, and you just have to get that photo for whatever compulsive reasons, there's ways to do it that doesn't really upset the people often. I mean, you can't control everything, but it's like Richard Sandler says it really well in his episode. He's like, you learn how to comport yourself. And basically what I say is like, if you're thinking that you're doing something wrong, or if you think you're sneaking a photo, people aren't dumb. They're going to feel that energy. They're going to see some creep lurking behind the bush, and the energy is going to be off. So you just have to get into a state of mind that you're not doing anything wrong, and that it comes from a place of love and curiosity. And I really do believe that when you can get into that state of mind, you can almost become invisible if you want to. It's your choice, you know. You just have to do that legwork and how you can do that. Or if you don't want to be invisible and you want to be kind of a part of the narrative of the image, like people that take really close, candid photography, they're much more part of the narrative of that image than people who have a 3,000 millimeter lens and shoot it from, you know, Toledo. But I still think they are part of that narrative, of that image. You know, it's all, the photographer taking a picture of a cheetah is part of the mystique of that photo, whether you subconsciously or consciously think of that. And I think a lot about that. What level of narrative, 1 through 100, is that photographer part of that intriguing thing? When somebody has this reaction in the photo, like Bruce Gilden, like clutching their pearls, well, you know, we're subconsciously wondering what Bruce is involved, you know, what his thinking or reaction was, or did he get punched? You know, like he's part of that narrative. Or the photographer, did the cheetah eat the photographer? You know, like, who knows?
I know we're coming up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Todd.
No, I was just going to say, do you find that when shooting with flash, because I kind of feel that there was a change once I started using a lot of flash, I found that because it was so open that I was shooting, that the people's perception of me when I was shooting, I had a lot fewer problems, just because it was like, I'm like, you're my camera, man.
That's such an interesting. That's such an interesting point. And one of the conversations I had recently with Michelle Groscott from LA was exactly that. Is like, you know, she brought up an interesting point I hadn't really thought of in the terms of, I think what you're saying is that her approach, you know, is so obviously engaging. And a lot of times there's a few words exchanged, positive mostly, you know, and she'll say, oh, thanks, okay, bye, bye. And then she has this like great energy and whatever. And that was 5 years ago. Her style has changed since then. But for a long time she was, you know, had that kind of approach where she was really close in proximity. And some of the criticism she gets from outside people, or maybe people inside the photo community, is that it's kind of gets into the conversation of ethics. And her issue is, why does she get any more flack than somebody who's shooting from the hip and taking a shot of a scene and using those people in their image that gets released on the internet or whatever, just the same as hers? At least she's giving the opportunity to those people to react. Ow, just got a leg cramp. Getting old and dehydrated, I guess. But I do think that's a very, very interesting topic to unpack, because you could speak for hours about the complexities of that. But what Wrong Side of the Lens hopefully does is show a bit of that spectrum from people who do just different approaches to the same kind of thing that's all called street photography. It's like we don't have the nuanced nomenclature to like unpack these. You know, we have flash photography and non-flash photography. It's like that's not nuanced enough to really get into what these different kind of like approaches and implications could be. And the weird thing is, to me, is that each photographer could do, like myself, I do that whole spectrum at different times, depending on my mood, depending on what kind of photo I need to get or want to get, and so it's all has to be defined by the individual on what they're ethically willing to get, what they think is right, what they think is wrong. Anything short of doing harm to somebody, I guess you could unpack what harm is, but you know,
Josh,
most
people,
Josh,
we're coming up on the hour.
We're gonna have to wrap it up.
Otherwise, it's been an hour.
Instagram.
That's
It's been an hour, believe it or not.
I thought it was
Thanks
like
a million.
about 15 minutes.
I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I've really super enjoyed watching the series. And I'll see
you so much.
I'll see you in Paris, by the way.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome. I'm excited about that. Yeah. And just really quick, I'm in Paris, Berlin, and London over the next couple days, and then LA at the end. So if anyone here listening can go or knows people that can go, please do hit me up, because I would love to get some people out. Today was amazing. The conversations were fantastic. People were super engaged, and it was like a really, really great conversation.
Best
and
of
so
luck.
was
Thanks
this.
very much, Josh.
Best of luck.
Have a great day.
And I'm looking forward to the Amazon and Netflix.
Me too. Please.
See you guys.
Congratulations.
Bye-bye.